In the vast expanse of the Andromeda Spiral, where 1,000 civilizations have risen and fallen across millennia, one name whispers through the void like a death sentence: the Kethmori. These ancient predators have stalked the galaxy for over 50,000 years, appearing from the dark between stars to harvest entire worlds, leaving behind only silent planets stripped of all sentient life. No species has ever survived their coming. No military has ever turned them back. No technology has ever slowed their relentless advance. The galaxy's greatest empires, the crystalline Zephyrians who bend light itself to their will, the hive-minded collective that spans 10,000 worlds, the energy beings of a Nexus core, all have one thing in common. When long-range sensors detect the characteristic void signatures of Kethmori harvesters, they don't fight. They run. But on a small blue world in an unremarkable spiral arm, a young species called humanity is about to discover that sometimes the best way to deal with monsters isn't to run from them. Sometimes you become something they're afraid of instead. The galaxy is about to learn why humans don't just survive. They thrive in places that would drive other species to madness. And the Kethmori, ancient and terrible as they are about to face something they've never encountered in 50 millennia of conquest. A species that looks at the galaxy's ultimate predators and asks, "Is that all you've got?" The stars themselves will remember what happens when Earth's children decide that enough is enough. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Crystal Courts had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations across 3 centuries of diplomatic service. Her crystalline form, naturally attuned to the quantum fluctuations of space-time, had carried her to 1,000 worlds and into the presence of beings so ancient they remembered when stars were young. Yet nothing in her vast experience had prepared her for the primitive audacity she now witnessed aboard the human vessel Indomitable. The ship itself defied every principle of advanced engineering Veltar understood. Where Zephyrian vessels were grown from living crystal matrices that sang in harmony with cosmic forces, this human craft was a brutal assemblage of metal plates welded together with what appeared to be deliberate disregard for aesthetic sensibility. Crude chemical rockets provided thrust. Primitive fusion reactors generated power. Most shocking of all, the humans had actually painted their ship, as if the vessel were some kind of artistic canvas rather than a precision instrument of space travel. "You cannot possibly be serious," Veltar said, her crystalline voice ringing with harmonic overtones of disbelief. The translation matrix built into the human ship's computer system rendered her words into their rough vocal patterns, though she doubted it could convey the full depth of her horror. Captain Sarachan stood before the holographic display showing the Kepler 442 system, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that somehow managed to convey both respect and absolute determination. Veltar had initially dismissed the human as another primitive mammal, but 3 hours of conversation had forced her to revise that assessment. The creature's mind, while housed in organic matter, possessed a quality that Veltar found both fascinating and deeply unsettling. "Ambassador, with respect, we've been serious about this from the moment your message reached Earth," Captain Shin replied. "The Kethmori are heading for New Canberra. 50,000 colonists, including 15,000 children. We don't abandon our people." Veltar's form shimmered, crystal facets refracting light in patterns that would have conveyed profound agitation to any Zephyrian observer. "Captain, perhaps the translation matrices are malfunctioning. The Kethmori are not pirates or raiders that your robust military might discourage. They are extinction incarnate. In 50,000 years, not one species has survived first contact with them." "Then, they haven't met humans yet," said Commander Zhang Wei, the ship's tactical officer. His scarred face bore the marks of humanity's brutal expansion across their local stellar group, where they had somehow managed to turn every form of cosmic disaster, from asteroid impacts to solar flares, into opportunities for technological advancement. Veltar turned her attention to the tactical display, where the human ship's primitive sensors showed the approaching Kethmori fleet. Even through the crude imaging systems, the site sent tremors through her crystalline matrix. 7 massive bioships, each one a living nightmare kilometers long, accompanied by dozens of smaller harvester craft. The bioships themselves were grown rather than built, their hulls pulsing with organic patterns that hurt to observe directly. Your species has no understanding of what you face, Veltar continued, forcing calm into her harmonic speech. The Kethmori do not simply kill. They harvest. Every sentient being in their path becomes raw material for their expansion. They consume consciousness itself, adding the mental patterns of their victims to their own collective intelligence. Every world they take makes them stronger, smarter, more dangerous. Captain Chun studied the display with the same expression Veltar had seen her use when examining routine stellar cartography. So, they're a hive mind that grows stronger by absorbing other minds. Noted. What else? What else? Veltar's form flared with bioluminescent shock. Captain, the last time the Kethmori appeared in this sector, the hegemony of Rigel sent 12 battle fleets to stop them. The hegemony controlled 300 star systems and possessed technology that could crack open moons for mining. The Kethmori harvested all 12 fleets in 6 hours. The survivors didn't even have time to send warning signals. Commander Zhang leaned forward, studying the tactical data with professional interest. 12 fleets. How many ships per fleet? 50 capital ships each, plus support vessels and fighter craft. So roughly 600 major combatants. Zhang nodded thoughtfully. What was their tactical approach? Veltar's confusion manifested as prismatic light cascading across her surface. Their tactical approach? How they fight? Captain Chun clarified. Formation patterns, weapon preferences, command, and control structures. Basic tactical intelligence. You speak as if this were a military exercise, Veltar said. Captain, the Kethmori don't fight. They harvest. Resistance is simply incorporated into their expansion calculations. The human bridge crew exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey entire conversations without words. Veltar had observed this behavior before. Their species seemed capable of coordinating complex thoughts through minute facial expressions and body language. It suggested a level of social evolution that belied their primitive technology. Ambassador, said Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, we're receiving additional data from the New Camber colony. They're tracking 17 Kethmori bioships now, not 7. Veltar's form went completely transparent, the crystalline equivalent of blood draining from organic faces. 17? That's a major harvesting fleet. They're not just taking the colony. They're preparing to strip the entire system. Good intel, Torres. What's our ETA to New Canberra? 47 hours at current speed, Captain. And the Kethmori? 51 hours. Captain Chen nodded. We beat them there by 4 hours. That's workable. Veltar's crystalline form began resonating at frequencies that registered as pure panic. Captain Chun, I believe the translation matrix is malfunctioning again. You cannot possibly intend to engage 17 Kethmori bioships with a single primitive vessel. Actually, Ambassador, we're not going alone. Captain Chun touched a control surface, and the tactical display expanded to show the broader region around New Canberra. The Yamato, Warrior, and Defiance are converging on the system from different vectors, plus the colonial defense platforms and whatever civilian ships can be armed. 4 ships, Veltar whispered, her voice barely registering on the translation matrix. 4 ships against 17 Kethmori bioships. 4 human ships, Commander Zhang corrected. There's a difference. For the first time in her 3 centuries of diplomatic service, Veltar found herself completely without words. She had come to this meeting expecting to deliver standard evacuation protocols to another species facing extinction. Instead, she was witnessing what appeared to be elaborate suicide preparations conducted with the casual professionalism of a routine military operation. Ambassador, Captain Chun said gently, I understand this is difficult to process. Your species has survived by avoiding the Kethmori. That's a perfectly rational response to an overwhelming threat. But humans don't really do rational responses to overwhelming threats. Then what do you do? Veltar managed to ask. Captain Shun smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both reassuring and absolutely terrifying. We do whatever it takes to protect our people. And if that means going through the galaxy's boogeymen to do it, then that's what we do. The bridge fell silent, except for the steady hum of the ship's primitive machinery. Veltar's crystalline form cycled through several different refractive patterns as she struggled to process what she was hearing. Finally, she managed to compose herself enough to speak. Captain, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. Your species has been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. You've encountered perhaps a dozen other sentient species. You know virtually nothing about the greater galaxy or its history. Why are you so confident that you can succeed where civilizations with millions of years of experience have failed? Captain Sean was quiet for a long moment, studying the approaching nightmare on the tactical display. When she finally spoke, her voice carried something that Veltar's translation matrix struggled to identify, a quality that seemed to combine determination with something far more primal. Ambassador, let me tell you something about humans. We evolved on a planet that spent most of its history trying to kill us. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic explosions, magnetic pole reversals. Earth has thrown everything at us except a direct hit from a gamma-ray burst, and we're still here. We didn't survive by being the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. We survived by being too stubborn to die. She turned to face Veltar directly. We spent our entire evolutionary history looking at things that should have been able to kill us and figuring out ways to kill them first. Saber-toothed tigers, woolly mammoths, other humans, diseases, natural disasters. We turned them all into stepping stones. And when we reached the stars, we found the same thing. Hostile environments, impossible challenges, and people telling us that something can't be done. And we did it anyway. Commander Zhang pulled up additional tactical data. The Kethmori have been harvesting the galaxy for 50,000 years because no one's ever made them pay a price for it. They've never faced resistance that cost them anything meaningful. They've never encountered prey that fought back effectively enough to make them reconsider their approach. You think you can make them reconsider? Veltar asked. Ambassador, Captain Shun said, we're going to make them regret ever coming to this system. And when word gets out about what happens at New Canberra, we're going to make every Kethmori in the galaxy wonder if maybe it's time to find a new line of work. The tactical display updated again, showing the continued approach of both human and Kethmori fleets toward New Canberra. Veltar stared at the projection, trying to reconcile what she was seeing with everything she knew about galactic history. There's something else you should understand about humans, Ambassador, Lieutenant Torres added from her station. We don't just fight to win. We fight to make sure the fight was worth having. I don't understand. Captain Shin walked over to the viewport, gazing out at the stars streaming past as the Indomitable pushed toward its destiny. When we're done at New Canberra, the galaxy is going to have a new story to tell. Not about the species that ran from the Kethmori, but about the species that stood their ground and reminded the universe that being ancient doesn't make you invincible. And if you fail, if your ships are destroyed and your colonies harvested, Captain Shin's reflection in the viewport smiled, that same terrifying human smile. Then we'll make sure our failure teaches the next human fleet exactly how to succeed. Veltar realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just another species marching toward extinction, but a species that had somehow weaponized the very concept of extinction itself. These humans weren't preparing to die gloriously. They were preparing to turn their potential destruction into a tool for eventual victory. As the Indomitable continued its course toward New Canberra, Ambassador Veltar began composing the most important message of her 3-century career. The Zephyrian crystal quartz needed to know that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The age of running from the Kethmori was about to end. Whether that meant the end of the Kethmori themselves, or the beginning of something entirely new, remained to be seen. But Veltar had lived long enough to recognize a historical turning point when she saw one. And every instinct in her crystalline matrix told her that the galaxy was about to discover why humans had never learned to be afraid of the dark. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the ancient halls of Nexus Prime, where representatives of 47 species gathered in an atmosphere thick with barely contained panic. The crystalline towers of the council chambers had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth of star-spanning civilizations, and the careful diplomacy that had maintained galactic peace for over 10,000 years. They had never witnessed anything like this. Council Speaker Thane 9, his energy form crackling with barely contained electromagnetic distress, floated above the central podium while holographic displays showed real-time sensor data from the Kepler 442 system. Around the chamber, the galaxy's most advanced civilizations watched in stunned silence as their fundamental understanding of warfare was systematically dismantled. The engagement began 4 hours ago, Thane 9 announced, his voice resonating through subspace translators in 47 different linguistic patterns. Initial Kethmori deployment followed standard harvesting protocols. 17 bioships established perimeter control around New Canberra, while harvester drones began atmospheric entry sequences. The primary display showed the New Canberra system in tactical overview. The Kethmori fleet had arranged itself in a classic harvesting formation. Bioships positioned at strategic points around the planet, while smaller craft descended to begin the systematic collection of sentient life. It was a pattern that had been repeated on thousands of worlds across 50 millennia, refined to mathematical perfection. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Crystal Quartz stood in her designated observation area, her crystalline form refracting ambient light in patterns of deep unease. She had arrived from a human ship Indomitable just hours before the engagement began, bearing witness testimony that had shaken the council to its core. Now, she watched the impossible unfold before her eyes. Standard harvesting protocols assume minimal resistance, continued Thanine. The Kethmori bioships positioned themselves for optimal atmospheric processing, with harvester craft beginning descent patterns toward major population centers. Representative Kixthora of the Hive Collective, her insectoid form mantled in ceremonial bioarmor, chittered a question through her translator. And the human response? The human response, Thane 9 said, his energy form flickering with something approaching disbelief, was to immediately attack the largest bioship in the formation. A wave of shocked harmonics, clicks, and electromagnetic pulses rippled through the assembly. The concept was so fundamentally contrary to established tactical doctrine that several species translators initially refused to process the statement. The tactical display zoomed in to show the human vessels in detail. For ships, primitive by galactic standards, crude assemblages of metal and chemical propulsion systems that would have been laughably obsolete even by the standards of most species' early space age. Against them, bioships that massed millions of tons each, living weapons grown across centuries, and guided by collective intelligences that had harvested entire star clusters. The lead human vessel, designated Indomitable, opened fire with projectile weapons, Thane 9 continued. Physical projectiles, accelerated metal slugs. Council Representative Zervaleth, a gaseous being whose consciousness existed in carefully maintained magnetic fields, pulsed with confusion. Projectile weapons against bioships? The organic hulls regenerate faster than physical damage can accumulate. That, said Thane, is what the humans were counting on. The display shifted to show close-up sensor readings from the engagement. The human ships were firing continuously, streams of metal slugs impacting the bioships' hulls at tremendous velocities. As predicted, the organic armor immediately began repairing itself, cellular matrices flowing to seal breaches and restore structural integrity. But something was wrong with the repair process. Analysis of the human projectiles reveals an unexpected composition, Thane 9 announced. Each slug contains trace amounts of engineered biological agents, modified Earth bacteria designed to interfere with Keth Mori cellular regeneration. Ambassador Veltar's crystalline form brightened with realization. During her time aboard the Indomitable, she had observed human crew members discussing something they called biological warfare protocols. She had assumed it was another example of their species' primitive approach to conflict. She had been wrong. The humans weaponized their own planet's microbial life? Asked Council Member Ithic of the Silicon Symbiosis, his rocky form grinding with disbelief. Not their own planets, corrected Thane 9. Every planet they've ever encountered. The humans have been collecting and cataloging biological agents from across their expansion zone for the past century. When they learned about Keth Mori regenerative capabilities, they engineered bacterial strains specifically designed to disrupt those cellular processes. The tactical display showed the results in real time, where human projectiles impacted Keth Mori bioships. Instead of clean regeneration, spreading zones of necrotic tissue began appearing. The bioship's immune systems evolved over millions of years to counter every biological threat the galaxy could produce, had never encountered anything like Earth's relentless microbial evolution. The lead bioship is showing structural degradation, Thane 9 reported. Cellular regeneration has ceased in 17% of its Hull, Massachusetts. Representative Kixthora leaned forward, her compound eyes tracking the battle data with professional interest. What is the Keth Mori response? 3 bioships have broken from harvesting formation to engage the human vessels directly. They appear to be confused by human tactical doctrine. This was an understatement of cosmic proportions. The Keth Mori had encountered every form of space combat the galaxy had to offer over their 50,000-year expansion. Energy weapons, gravity manipulation, dimensional warfare, temporal displacement. They had adapted to every conceivable threat. But they had never encountered anything like human tactical thinking. The humans were fighting like humans had always fought, by turning their enemies' strengths into weaknesses and their own weaknesses into weapons. The human vessels are not attempting to match Keth Mori firepower, observed Council Member Tathmar, a crystalline entity whose thought processes operated on quantum scales. They appear to be deliberately drawing attention to themselves. Correct, said Thane 9. While the Indomitable and her escorts engage 3 bioships directly, the 4th human vessel, Defiance, has maneuvered to the edge of the system and begun broadcasting on all frequencies. Broadcasting what? A complete tactical analysis of human anti-Keth Mori warfare doctrine, along with detailed specifications for biological weapon production and deployment strategies. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Electromagnetic bursts, harmonic wails, and pheromone clouds filled the air as 47 species simultaneously realized what the humans were actually doing. This wasn't a battle for New Canberra. This was a demonstration. Ambassador Veltar watched the display with growing awe. During her time aboard the human ship, Captain Chun had mentioned something about making sure the fight was worth having. Now she understood what that meant. The humans are teaching the galaxy how to fight the Keth Mori, she announced to the council. They're not just defending one colony. They're ending 50,000 years of Keth Mori expansion. The tactical display confirmed her analysis. Even as the battle raged around New Canberra, the transmission from the Defiance was being picked up by monitoring stations across the galaxy. Within hours, every spacefaring civilization would have access to humanity's anti-Keth Mori research. This is unprecedented, whispered Council Speaker Thane 9. They're sharing military technology, freely, without negotiation or compensation. It gets worse, said Representative Zervaleth, whose gas-form consciousness had been monitoring the broader communications network. The humans have been preparing this for months. They've already distributed biological weapon production facilities to their colonies throughout their territorial space. Any species that wants to implement anti-Keth Mori defenses can obtain manufacturing specifications immediately. On the display, the battle continued to evolve in ways that defied every principle of established galactic warfare. The human ships were taking massive damage, their primitive armor and shielding no match for Keth Mori bioweapons. But every hit they took seemed to provide new tactical data, which was immediately transmitted to the rest of the human fleet and included in the ongoing broadcast. The Keth Mori, for their part, were experiencing something they had never encountered in 50 millennia of conquest: tactical uncertainty. Their bioships were designed for harvesting operations against species that either fled or died quickly. Extended combat against enemies who adapted in real time was outside their experiential parameters. 3 more bioships are showing signs of biological contamination, reported Thainine. The bacterial agents appear to be spreading through their atmospheric processors. How is that possible? Asked Representative Kix Thora. Ambassador Veltar answered. The humans didn't just engineer bacteria to attack Keth Mori's cellular structure. They engineered them to spread through Keth Mori respiratory and filtration systems. Every breath the bioships take brings in more contamination. The implications were staggering. The Keth Mori bioships were not just machines of war, they were living ecosystems. Their atmospheric processors, nutrient distribution networks, and cellular repair systems were all interconnected. The human biological agents weren't just causing localized damage. They were systematically poisoning the ship's entire life support infrastructure. The lead bioship is showing catastrophic system failures, announced Thane 9. Internal atmospheric contamination has reached critical levels. On the tactical display, the massive Keth Mori vessel, a living nightmare that had harvested the populations of a dozen worlds, began to convulse. Its bioluminescent hull patterns, normally pulsing with healthy organic rhythms, started flickering erratically. Emergency venting of contaminated atmosphere created spreading clouds of toxic gas around the dying ship. The Indomitable is moving to finish it, observed Council Member Tathmar. The human ship, trailing atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches, accelerated toward the dying bioship. Instead of firing more projectiles, it began broadcasting a new signal, a complex electromagnetic pattern that seemed to have no obvious purpose. What are they transmitting now? Asked Representative Zervaleth. Analysis indicates music, said Thane 9, his energy form flickering with confusion. Music, specifically, a human musical composition titled The Imperial March. Cross-reference with human cultural databases suggests it is associated with fictional villains in their entertainment media. The council chamber fell silent except for the subspace hum of translation systems. 47 advanced civilizations watched in bemused horror as humanity's most primitive vessel played villain music at a dying Keth Mori bioship. Then, the bioship exploded. The detonation was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Instead of the clean plasma fires typical of technological warfare, the bioship's death throes created a spreading cloud of contaminated biological matter. Keth Mori cellular fragments, saturated with human-engineered bacteria, dispersed through local space in a pattern that would contaminate any other bioship that approached. The humans have weaponized the bioship's death throes, whispered Representative Kixthora. They've turned Keth Mori regenerative biology against itself. The remaining Keth Mori bioships began retreating from the expanding contamination zone, but it was too late. The human biological agents had already spread throughout the fleet formation. What had begun as a routine harvesting operation was becoming a biological disaster of unprecedented proportions. Keth Mori fleet is withdrawing from the system, reported Thane 9. 16 bioships showing various degrees of biological contamination. They appear to be fleeing. The word hung in the council chamber like a revelation. The Keth Mori, ancient scourges of the galaxy, were fleeing from 4 primitive human ships. The human vessel Defiance is updating its tactical broadcast, continued Thane 9. They're now transmitting detailed analysis of Keth Mori retreat patterns, along with recommendations for pursuit tactics and containment protocols. Ambassador Veltar realized she was witnessing the end of an era. For 50,000 years, the galaxy had lived in fear of the Kethmori. Entire civilizations had based their expansion strategies on avoiding these ancient predators. Trade routes, territorial boundaries, even technological development had been influenced by the need to stay beneath Kethmori notice. All of that was ending. In the space of 4 hours, humanity had demonstrated that the galaxy's ultimate Boogeymen were not invincible. More than that, they had freely shared the knowledge needed to replicate their success. Council Speaker, said Representative Zervaleth, we need to address the immediate implications of this engagement. If human anti-Kethmori techniques prove widely effective, it could destabilize the entire galactic order. Thane 9's energy form pulsed with consideration. Elaborate. The Kethmori threat has been a stabilizing force for millennia. Species that might otherwise come into conflict have maintained peaceful relations, partly because they all feared a common enemy. If that enemy is removed, the implications were clear to every being in the chamber. The galaxy had been shaped by the Kethmori threat. Remove that threat, and the careful balance of power that had maintained peace for thousands of years could collapse overnight. There's another consideration, added Ambassador Veltar. The humans didn't just defeat the Kethmori. They made it look easy. When the rest of the galaxy realizes that 50,000 years of terror were ended by species with primitive technology and creative biological warfare, they'll want to know what else humans can do, finished Representative Kixthora. The tactical display showed the human ships regrouping around New Canberra, their primitive hulls scarred by Kethmori weapons, but their mission successful. The colony was safe. The Kethmori were in full retreat, and across the galaxy, monitoring stations were receiving detailed instructions for implementing human anti-Kethmori warfare techniques. The humans have fundamentally altered the strategic balance of the galaxy, announced Council Speaker Thane 9. The question before this council is how we respond to this new reality. Ambassador Veltar thought about her time aboard the Indomitable, remembering Captain Chen's casual confidence in the face of impossible odds. The humans had approached the galaxy's greatest threat with the same attitude they brought to any other problem. Analyze it, find its weaknesses, and exploit those weaknesses until the problems cease to exist. Council Speaker, she said, I believe we need to consider a more fundamental question than how to respond to human tactical innovations, which is, what happens when the galaxy's newest species decides that some of our other ancient problems need solving? The chamber fell silent as 47 civilizations contemplated the implications of humanity's casual approach to the impossible. The Kethmori had been the galaxy's primary existential threat for 50 millennia, but they were far from its only problem. And if humans could solve the Kethmori question in 4 hours, what might they accomplish given more time? 3 months after New Canberra, the galaxy was learning to sleep uneasily for entirely new reasons. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of Terra Station, humanity's newest deep space research facility, watching construction drones assemble what would become the largest biological warfare production complex in galactic history. The irony wasn't lost on her. 6 months ago, she had been a xenobiologist studying the peaceful applications of interspecies microbiology. Today, she was overseeing the mass production of weaponized bacteria specifically designed to counter threats that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Doctor, came a voice behind her. The Zephyrian delegation has arrived. Dr. Vasquez turned to see Commander Morrison, the station's military liaison, his expression carrying the peculiar mixture of pride and concern that had become common among human military personnel since New Canberra. The victory had been complete, decisive, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. How many ships this time? 47. They're calling it a scientific exchange mission, but our intelligence suggests it's more like a technological pilgrimage. Through the observation deck's massive transparent aluminum windows, Dr. Vasquez could see the approaching Zephyrian fleet. The crystalline vessels moved with the fluid grace typical of their species' technology, each ship grown rather than built, their faceted hulls refracting local starlight in patterns of breathtaking beauty. It was easy to forget that each of those elegant vessels carried weapons systems capable of cracking moons. 47 ships for a scientific exchange, Dr. Vasquez mused. I remember when first contact with the Zephyrians involved exactly one diplomatic courier. Times change. Ma'am, they're not the only ones. We've got similar delegations inbound from the Hive Collective, the Silicon Symbiosis, the Nexus Core, and at least 12 smaller species. Everyone wants access to our biological warfare research. Dr. Vasquez nodded, though part of her mind was still processing the larger implications. Before New Canberra, humanity had been a minor species on the galactic periphery, interesting perhaps, but hardly significant in the broader cosmic picture. They had colonies on maybe 30 worlds, a small fleet of primitive vessels, and technology that most advanced species considered charmingly obsolete. Now, they were the galaxy's premier military innovators. Any word from the Keth Mori themselves? Commander Morrison's expression darkened. Long-range sensors are tracking movement in the void reaches. Deep space intelligence suggests they're consolidating their remaining fleets, probably trying to develop countermeasures to our biological agents. Probably, Dr. Vasquez agreed. The question is whether they can adapt faster than we can innovate. This was the heart of humanity's new strategic doctrine. The Keth Mori had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years by being perfectly adapted to every threat they encountered. Their bioships could regenerate damage. Their collective intelligence could process tactical information faster than any individual mind, and their psychological warfare was so effective that most species fled rather than fight. But adaptation was a two-way process, and humans had spent their entire evolutionary history becoming very, very good at adapting. Doctor, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command, announced Lieutenant Shun from the communication station. Admiral Park wants to speak with you directly. The main display flickered to life, showing Admiral Sarah Park in her office at Earth Command. Behind her, Dr. Vasquez could see the familiar blue-white curve of humanity's home world, now surrounded by defensive installations that made it look like a technological porcupine. Doctor, we need an update on Project Nemesis, Admiral Park said without preamble. How soon can you have production-ready samples? Dr. Vasquez glanced at Commander Morrison before responding. Project Nemesis was classified at levels that made most of humanity's military leadership uncomfortable, but recent intelligence from the void reaches had forced their hand. Admiral, the initial batch will be ready within 2 weeks. But I need to stress again that we're moving into uncharted territory here. The biological agents we used at New Canberra were targeted specifically at Keth Mori cellular regeneration. What we're developing now will work against any organic life form in the galaxy, Admiral Park finished. I understand the implications, Doctor, but if the intelligence reports are accurate, we may not have a choice. Dr. Vasquez had seen those reports. The Keth Mori weren't just developing countermeasures to human biological warfare. They were preparing to unleash something called a final harvest, designed to strip entire star systems of all biological life in a matter of days. The ancient predators had apparently decided that if they couldn't harvest selectively anymore, they would harvest everything. There's something else, Admiral Dar. Vasquez continued. The galactic response to our research is concerning. Every major species wants access to our biological warfare techniques, but they're also asking for offensive applications. Meaning they don't just want to defend against the Keth Mori. They want weapons they can use against each other. This was the nightmare scenario that had kept human leadership awake for the past 3 months. In solving the galaxy's oldest problem, they had potentially created dozens of new ones. Every species that gained access to human biological warfare techniques could modify them for use against their traditional enemies. The careful balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for millennia was beginning to collapse. Any specific threats we need to be aware of? The Hive Collective has been asking pointed questions about anti-insectoid biological agents. The silicon symbiosis wants to know if we can develop something that affects crystalline-based life forms. And the Nexus core? Dr. Vasquez paused, checking her notes. The Nexus core wants to know if biological warfare can be adapted to target energy-based consciousness. Admiral Park was quiet for a long moment. In other words, everyone wants a weapon that works specifically against their enemies. Yes, ma'am. And they're all assuming we'll provide it, because we shared our anti-Kethmori research freely. This was the unintended consequence of humanity's approach to the Kethmori crisis. By distributing their biological warfare techniques without restriction, they had established a precedent that other species now expected them to maintain. The galaxy was looking to humanity not just as the species that had solved the Kethmori problem, but as the species that could solve any biological warfare challenge. Doctor, what's your professional assessment? Can we maintain our technological advantage while managing these requests? Dr. Vasquez looked out at the approaching Zephyrian fleet, then at the biological warfare production facilities taking shape around Terra Station. Admiral, we're not just dealing with a technological challenge anymore. We're dealing with the fact that the galaxy has fundamentally changed how it thinks about warfare. Elaborate. Before New Canberra, major conflicts were resolved through traditional military engagement. Energy weapons, gravity manipulation, conventional space combat. Biological warfare was considered too unpredictable, too dangerous to galactic ecosystems. Most species had treaties specifically prohibiting its development. And now, every major power is requesting research partnerships specifically focused on biological weapons development. We've accidentally created a new arms race, one where the primary currency is genetically engineered microorganisms instead of energy weapons. Admiral Park rubbed her temples, a gesture Dr. Vasquez recognized from their many late-night strategy sessions. Options? We have 3 basic choices. First, we continue sharing our research freely and hope that mutual deterrence prevents anyone from using biological weapons aggressively. Second, we restrict access to our research and risk other species developing their own biological warfare programs independently. Third, Dr. Vasquez took a deep breath. Third, we accept that we've become the galaxy's biological warfare specialists and use that position to actively manage galactic stability. The implications hung in the air between them. The third option meant that humanity would essentially become the galaxy's arbiter of biological warfare, deciding who got access to what research, managing the balance between defensive and offensive capabilities, and potentially using their unique expertise as a form of diplomatic leverage. It also meant accepting responsibility for every biological weapon that would be deployed across the galaxy for the foreseeable future. Commander Morrison, Admiral Park said, turning to address the military liaison. What's your assessment of our current defensive position? Admiral, we're in the strongest position we've ever held. Every major species wants to maintain good relations with us because they all want access to our biological warfare research. But that same position makes us the primary target if anyone decides that human technological advancement represents a threat to galactic stability. Meaning that if the galaxy decides humanity is becoming too dangerous, we'll face a coalition of every major power simultaneously. And while our biological weapons are effective, they're not magic. We can't fight the entire galaxy. Dr. Vasquez nodded. There's also the Kethmori response to consider. Intelligence suggests they're developing something called purity protocols, biological agents designed to eliminate any non-Kethmori organic life they encounter. A sterilization protocol, Admiral Park said quietly. Yes, ma'am. If they can't harvest selectively anymore, they apparently plan to eliminate all biological life in the galaxy and start fresh with Kethmori biomass. The observation deck fell silent except for the steady hum of station machinery. Outside, the Zephyrian fleet continued its approach, beautiful crystalline ships carrying representatives of a species that had survived for millions of years by carefully managing their technological development and diplomatic relationships. Now, they were here to learn how to kill things with weaponized bacteria. Doctor, Admiral Park said finally, I need your recommendation. Given everything we know about the current situation, what should humanity's next move be? Dr. Vasquez studied the approaching fleet, then turned back to the display showing Earth and its defensive installations. Admiral, I think we need to stop pretending that we're still the same species that first achieved spaceflight 2 centuries ago. New Canberra changed us. It changed how we think about warfare, how we approach problems, and how the rest of the galaxy sees us. Go on. We've become something we never intended to be. The galaxy's military innovators. Every major conflict from now on is going to involve someone asking whether humans have developed a solution. Every arms race is going to be measured against human technological advancement. Every species is going to have to decide whether they want us as allies or enemies. And I think we need to accept that responsibility instead of trying to avoid it. The galaxy has problems that go far beyond the Keth Mori. Ancient conflicts between species that have been stalemated for millennia, territorial disputes that no one knows how to resolve, technological challenges that have stymied entire civilizations. Dr. Vasquez gestured toward the biological warfare production facilities. We've proven that human approaches to problem-solving can work on galactic scales. Maybe it's time to find out what else we can fix. Admiral Park was quiet for a long moment, studying something off-screen. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that Dr. Vasquez recognized as the sound of major decisions being made. Doctor, you're recommending that humanity actively positions itself as the galaxy's primary problem solver? I'm recommending that we acknowledge what we've already become and start making conscious decisions about how to use that position. The risks are enormous, Dr. Vasquez agreed. But so are the opportunities. Right now, every major species is coming to us asking for help with their military challenges. If we handle that correctly, we can help shape a more stable galactic order. If we handle it badly, we become the target of every species that decides human advancement represents an existential threat. Outside, the first Zephyrian ships were beginning docking procedures with Terra Station. Soon, Dr. Vasquez would be briefing crystalline beings whose civilization was older than human recorded history on the finer points of biological warfare tactics. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on her. Admiral, there's one more thing to consider, which is... Dr. Vasquez smiled, though there was little humor in the expression. What happens when the galaxy realizes that biological warfare was just the beginning? That human problem-solving approaches can be applied to challenges they haven't even thought of yet, such as faster-than-light communication, terraforming hostile worlds in decades instead of centuries, artificial intelligence that can process galactic-scale datasets, energy weapons that make current technology look like stone tools. Dr. Vasquez paused. Admiral, we solved the Keth Mori problem not because we had better technology, but because we approached it differently than anyone else had ever tried. And you think we can apply that same approach to other problems? I think the rest of the galaxy is about to find out what happens when a species that evolved by turning every disaster into an opportunity gets access to galactic-scale resources and challenges. Admiral Park smiled, and for the first time in months, it looked genuine. Doctor, prepare your briefing materials for the Zephyrian delegation, and start thinking about what comes after biological warfare. Yes, ma'am. Any specific parameters? Whatever comes next, make sure it's something that keeps the galaxy interesting. As the transmission ended, Dr. Vasquez looked out at the stars beyond Terra Station. Somewhere in that vast darkness, the Keth Mori were preparing their final gambit. Across the galaxy, ancient civilizations were reassessing their strategic positions based on what a species of primitive mammals had accomplished in 4 hours of combat. And on dozens of human colonies, researchers were working on projects that would make biological warfare look quaint by comparison. The galaxy had spent 50,000 years learning to fear the Keth Mori. It was about to learn what happened when humans decided that fear was counterproductive. The Kethmori Collective had not experienced fear in 50,000 years. Pain, yes, the occasional tactical setback that required adaptation. Confusion, certainly. Prey species sometimes developed unexpected defensive measures that provided momentary challenge. But fear, the primal terror of encountering something fundamentally superior, was an emotion they had forgotten how to process. Now, in the deepest reaches of the void, where ancient bioships gathered in configurations unseen since the Great Purge that had established their galactic dominance, the collective was learning to remember what fear felt like. The consciousness that had once been supreme harvester Kelthrus floated in the bioneural matrix of the eternal hunger, its individual identity subsumed into the greater collective awareness as it processed the catastrophic data from New Canberra. The experience was unlike anything in their recorded memory, not just a tactical defeat, but a fundamental challenge to their basic understanding of biological warfare. Around the eternal hunger, 17 other Apex bioships maintained formation in the empty space between galaxies. Each vessel was a masterwork of biological engineering, grown across centuries and inhabited by collective consciousnesses that had harvested millions of worlds. They represented the accumulated knowledge and experience of the galaxy's most successful predators. They were also, for the first time in their existence, afraid. The collective consciousness that guided the fleet processed the human attack data with increasing distress. The biological agents used against them at New Canberra hadn't just been effective. They had been specifically designed to exploit vulnerabilities that the Kethmori themselves hadn't known existed. More disturbing, the humans had anticipated Kethmori adaptive responses and engineered their weapons to evolve faster than Kethmori biology could counter them. It suggested a level of biological warfare sophistication that should have taken millennia to develop, compressed into what appeared to be months of focused research. But most terrifying of all was the realization that the attack on New Canberra hadn't been humanity's best effort. Analysis of their broadcast transmissions showed that they had been holding back, testing Kethmori responses and gathering data for future engagements. The humans had used the galaxy's ultimate predators as test subjects. Deep within the Eternal Hunger's bioneural network, the entity that had been Kelthrus interfaced with the collective memory, searching through 50,000 years of conquest for any comparable situation. The archives contained records of species that had challenged them. The crystal hegemony, with their reality-warping technology, the void dancers who could manipulate space-time itself, the machine collective that had converted entire star systems into computational matrices. All had fallen to Kethmori superiority. All had been harvested and their capabilities incorporated into the collective's ever-growing knowledge base. But none had fought like the humans. Analysis complete, pulsed the voice of the eternal hungers guiding consciousness through the bioneural network. Human tactical doctrine represents unprecedented adaptive threat. Recommendation: implement Final Purge protocols. The Final Purge. It was a strategy that had never been used, developed during the early centuries of Kethmori expansion as a theoretical response to existential threats. Instead of selective harvesting, it involved the systematic sterilization of entire galactic regions, eliminating all biological life, and rebuilding from Kethmori genetic material. It was genocide on a scale that would make their previous conquests look like minor raids. Objection. Came another consciousness from the depths of the network. Final Purge protocols require consensus from all Apex vessels. Current force disposition includes only 18 of 47 active Apex units. The collective paused to process this. The engagement at New Canberra had been more devastating than initially calculated. 3 bioships had been completely destroyed, their collective consciousnesses lost forever. 14 others were quarantined in distant star systems, undergoing intensive biological decontamination that might take centuries to complete. Nearly 2/3 of their primary fleet strength was either destroyed or unavailable. Query: pulsed another consciousness. Status of human military expansion. The answer came as a data stream of sensory information gathered from across the galaxy. In the 6 months since New Canberra, human colonies had begun appearing in star systems previously considered too dangerous for settlement. Their ships, while still primitive by galactic standards, now carried biological warfare suites that could threaten any organic life form in known space. More concerning, other species were beginning to adopt human tactical doctrines. The Zephyrian Crystal Courts had established their own biological warfare research divisions. The Hive Collective was experimenting with human-designed bacterial agents. Even the energy beings of the Nexus Core were investigating ways to incorporate biological weapons into their arsenals. The humans hadn't just defeated the Keth Mori. They had fundamentally changed how the galaxy approached warfare. Additional data came the input from the Eternal Hunger sensory arrays. Human vessels approaching void reach perimeter. Configuration suggests deep space reconnaissance. The collective focused its attention on the approaching ships. 3 vessels, smaller than the human ships that had engaged them at New Canberra, moving through space that no other species had dared to enter for thousands of years. The void reaches were Keth Mori territory, the one region of the galaxy where their supremacy was absolute. The humans were scouting it like they were planning an invasion. Tactical assessment demanded the collective consciousness. Human vessels show minimal offensive capability, came the response. Configuration suggests scientific expedition rather than military engagement. Weapons systems limited to defensive point defense arrays. Biological warfare capability unknown. Vessels too distant for detailed analysis. The collective considered this information with growing unease. Human tactical doctrine emphasized adaptability and unconventional approaches to warfare. The fact that they were sending lightly armed scientific vessels into Keth Mori territory suggested either supreme confidence or in strategy so alien that the collective couldn't parse it. Orders queried the consciousness of the Void Render, another Apex bioship in the formation. The collective paused. Standard protocol would be to intercept the human vessels, harvest their crews for intelligence, and demonstrate Keth Mori territorial dominance. But New Canberra had demonstrated that human encounters rarely proceeded according to standard protocols. Deploy harvesters, the collective finally decided. Capture human vessels intact. Analysis priority on biological warfare capabilities and tactical intelligence. 3 harvester craft detached from the Void Render, living ships the size of human destroyers that could slice through most defensive measures like tissue paper. They accelerated toward the human vessels with the predatory grace that had made them the terror of 1,000 species. The humans responded by doing absolutely nothing. The lead human vessel, designated Curiosity according to its identification broadcasts, maintained course and speed as if it hadn't detected the approaching Keth Mori ships. Its 2 escort vessels, Darwin and Mindel, took flanking positions that would provide optimal firing angles for defensive engagement, but made no aggressive moves. Human vessels are broadcasting on open frequencies, reported the Void Render's consciousness. Content analysis indicates scientific data. Specify detailed sensor readings of local space conditions, stellar cartography updates, and biological analysis of void reach environmental characteristics. They appear to be conducting a routine scientific survey. The collective processed this information with increasing confusion. The humans were treating Keth Mori territory like an interesting research opportunity rather than a zone of cosmic horror that had claimed thousands of ships over the millennia. Additional broadcasts detected, continued the Void Render. The human vessels are transmitting their research data to locations throughout human space. Real-time updates on Keth Mori territorial characteristics and biological signatures. The implications struck the collective like a physical blow. The humans weren't just scouting Keth Mori territory. They were mapping it in detail and sharing that information with their entire species. Every piece of data they gathered was being transmitted back to human research facilities for analysis and integration into their anti-Keth Mori warfare programs. Harvester intercept in 3 minutes, reported the Void Render. Additional contacts came a new voice from the collective network. Human vessels approaching from 7 additional vectors. Configuration suggests coordinated reconnaissance operation. The tactical display updated to show the larger picture. Across the entire perimeter of the void reaches, human vessels were conducting simultaneous surveys, mapping Keth Mori territories with the methodical precision that had characterized their approach to every other galactic challenge. They were preparing for war on a scale that matched Keth Mori ambitions. Harvesters have achieved intercept range, reported the Void Render. Human vessels are hailing us. Hailing. Direct communication request on standard diplomatic frequencies. The collective had never received a diplomatic communication in 50,000 years of existence. Species either fled from them or were harvested. The concept of voluntary communication with prey was so alien that several collective consciousnesses briefly disconnected from the network in confusion. Accept communication, the collective finally decided. The main display activated to show the bridge of the human vessel Curiosity. A middle-aged human female in what appeared to be scientific attire sat in the command chair, flanked by crew members who showed no signs of fear or distress despite facing creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. This is Dr. Rebecca Torres, commanding the research vessel Curiosity, the human said in perfect Keth Mori linguistic patterns. We're conducting a peaceful scientific survey of this region and would appreciate the opportunity to exchange data with your vessels. The collective processed the communication in stunned silence. The human wanted to exchange data with Keth Mori bioships, as if this were a routine scientific collaboration rather than first contact with galactic extinction incarnate. You are in Keth Mori territorial space. The collective finally responded through the Void Render's communication systems. All organic life in this region is subject to harvesting protocols. Oh, we're aware of your territorial claims, Dr. Torres replied cheerfully. We've been studying your expansion patterns for several months now. Quite impressive, actually. 50,000 years of consistent growth without any significant territorial losses. That's the kind of long-term strategic thinking we respect. The collective consciousness reeled. The human was complimenting them on their success while simultaneously trespassing on their territory and conducting unauthorized research. Your vessels will be harvested, the collective stated. Resistance is futile. Actually, we were hoping to discuss that, Dr. Torres said. Our analysis of your biological warfare capabilities suggests that you're facing some significant strategic challenges following your encounter with our colleagues at New Canberra. We think we might be able to help. Help. Our research indicates that the biological agents used against your bioships have created long-term contamination issues that are affecting your operational capacity. We've developed some countermeasures that might be useful. The collective paused. The contamination from New Canberra was indeed a major problem. Despite months of research, they have been unable to develop effective countermeasures to human biological agents. Several bioships remained quarantined indefinitely, their biological systems too compromised to risk spreading the contamination to the rest of the fleet. You offer assistance to enemies? We prefer to think of this as a professional collaboration, Dr. Torres replied. Your species has dominated the galaxy through biological warfare for 50 millennia. Our species has been practicing biological warfare for maybe 6 months. There's clearly a lot we can learn from each other. What do you propose? Dr. Torres smiled, an expression that the collective found somehow more terrifying than any weapon display they had ever encountered. A knowledge exchange. We share our countermeasures to the New Canberra biological agents. You share your biological warfare research archives. Everyone benefits from improved understanding of galactic-scale biological systems. The collective considered this proposal with growing alarm. The human was suggesting a research partnership with creatures she should have been fleeing from in terror. More than that, she was approaching it with the casual professionalism of a routine academic collaboration. And if we refuse, then you continue dealing with biological contamination issues that are degrading your operational capacity while we continue developing increasingly effective anti-Keth Mori biological agents. Dr. Torres shrugged. Eventually, You'll either solve the contamination problem yourselves, in which case this conversation becomes moot, or you'll decide that your current approach to galactic expansion needs updating. The implications were clear. The humans weren't threatening the Keth Mori with immediate destruction. They were offering them a choice between cooperation and gradual obsolescence. Your species seeks to make allies of the Keth Mori. Our species seeks to understand how galactic biological systems work, Dr. Torres replied. You've been the galaxy's premier biological warfare specialist for 50,000 years. From a research perspective, you're absolutely fascinating. The collective processed this statement in silence. The human was treating them like interesting test subjects rather than galactic predators. It was perhaps the most humiliating thing that had happened to them since their first successful harvest. It was also, they were beginning to realize, potentially their only path to long-term survival. We will consider your proposal, the collective finally responded. Excellent, said Dr. Torres. We'll maintain our current position while you deliberate. Take your time. Good science requires careful consideration. The communication ended, leaving the collective alone with the most difficult decision in their 50,000-year history. They could maintain their traditional approach and risk eventual obsolescence, or they could accept humanity's offer and fundamentally alter their relationship with the galaxy. In the bioneural networks of 18 apex vessels, collective consciousnesses that had never known doubt began to consider the possibility that the age of Keth Mori supremacy was ending, and that perhaps, just perhaps, whatever came next might be more interesting than simple galactic domination. 5 years after New Cambria, the galaxy barely resembled what it had been before a species of upstart mammals had casually ended 50,000 years of terror with weaponized bacteria and excessive confidence. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Crystal Quartz stood in the observation deck of the newly commissioned research station Unity, watching humanity's latest project take shape in the space above Earth's moon. The construction was unlike anything in galactic architectural history. A massive orbital complex that somehow managed to integrate Zephyrian crystal-growing techniques, Hive collective bioarchitectural principles, Keth Mori organic hull materials, and human engineering pragmatism into a structure that was both beautiful and absolutely terrifying in its implications. It was the galaxy's first joint research facility dedicated to what humans cheerfully called collaborative problem-solving on cosmic scales. Status report, Ambassador, came the voice of Dr. Rebecca Torres, now Director of Interspecies Research Coordination, as she approached the observation deck, carrying what appeared to be a steaming cup of Earth coffee and a tablet displaying research data that would have been classified at the highest levels just 5 years ago. Disturbing, Veltar replied, her crystalline form refracting the light from the construction site in patterns of deep contemplation. Your species has a remarkable talent for making the impossible seem routine. Through the observation windows, they could see the latest arrivals at Research Station Unity. A Keth Mori bio ship, the former Void Render, now designated as the Synthesis, was docking with the station's organic interface ports. Its hull patterns have been modified from the aggressive red-in, black of a Predator vessel to the blue-green of a research ship, but it was still unmistakably one of the galaxy's former ultimate weapons. Beside it, a converted Zephyrian light sculptor was interfacing its crystalline matrices with the station's quantum communication arrays. And, approaching from the direction of the outer system, 3 Hive collective exploration vessels were bringing the latest batch of volunteer researchers to join what had become the galaxy's most prestigious and terrifying scientific collaboration. How are the integration protocols working? Dr. Torres asked, settling into one of the observation deck's chairs with the casual ease that had characterized humanity's approach to every impossible challenge they'd encountered. Better than anyone expected, Veltar admitted. The Keth Mori collective consciousnesses have adapted to collaborative research faster than our most optimistic projections suggested. Their 50,000-year accumulated knowledge base is proving invaluable. This was perhaps the most disturbing development of the past 5 years. When humanity had offered the galaxy's former Boogeymen a choice between cooperation and gradual obsolescence, No one had expected them to be quite so enthusiastic about cooperation. The Keth Mori, it turned out, were genuinely passionate about biological research. Once they got past the whole harvesting sentient life issue, they were brilliant scientists. Any conflicts between the research teams? 3 this week, Veltar replied. The Keth Mori researchers and the Zephyrian crystallographers got into what your people call a heated discussion about quantum biointegration techniques. It took 2 days to mediate. What was the outcome? They developed a hybrid approach that's proving more effective than either method alone. Veltar's form shifted to display patterns of reluctant admiration. Dr. Torres, your species has an alarming talent for turning conflict into innovation. Dr. Torres smiled, the same expression that had terrified and fascinated the galaxy for 5 years. Conflict is just collaboration with stronger emotions. Usually produces better results. On the main display, new data streams showed the current status of humanity's galactic integration projects. In the 5 years since New Canberra, they had established joint research stations in 47 star systems, created trade agreements with every major spacefaring civilization, and somehow managed to turn the galaxy's most ancient enemies into enthusiastic research partners. More disturbing, they had also solved problems that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia. The Zephyrian hegemony territorial dispute that had simmered for 3,000 years, resolved through human mediation and the development of shared crystal-growing colonies. The Hive Collective's expansion pressure that had threatened to trigger a galactic war, addressed through human-designed terraforming techniques that could turn gas giants into habitable worlds in decades instead of millennia. The ancient AI uprising that had turned the Andromeda core into a no-go zone for organic life, currently being negotiated through human diplomatic protocols that treated homicidal artificial intelligences like slightly difficult research partners. Ambassador, Dr. Torres continued, I need to brief you on our latest project. Veltar's crystalline form immediately shifted to patterns of deep concern. Human projects had a tendency to fundamentally alter the strategic balance of the galaxy. What are you calling this one? Galactic Optimization Initiative. That sounds ominous. It's actually quite straightforward, Dr. Torres said, activating a holographic display that showed the entire local galactic cluster. We've been analyzing resource distribution, technological development patterns, and territorial utilization across all known spacefaring civilizations. The display zoomed in to show specific regions of space, highlighting areas of inefficient resource usage, technological bottlenecks, and territorial conflicts that were preventing optimal development. Our analysis suggests that the galaxy is operating at roughly 12% of its theoretical efficiency, Dr. Torres continued. Most civilizations are constrained by traditional territorial boundaries, limited resource sharing agreements, and technological development that's focused on individual species' needs rather than collaborative advancement. Veltar studied the display with growing alarm. Dr. Torres, when humans analyze inefficiency, they tend to develop solutions that radically alter existing systems. Exactly, Dr. Torres replied cheerfully. We think we can optimize galactic civilization to achieve roughly 85% efficiency within 2 centuries. And the other 15%? Reserved for unexpected variables, cultural preservation, and what we call creative chaos margins. Can't optimize everything. That would make the galaxy boring. The display updated to show proposed optimization strategies. Joint terraforming projects that would increase habitable worlds by 300%. Collaborative research initiatives that would accelerate technological development by combining the knowledge bases of all major civilizations. Trade networks that would eliminate resource scarcity across most inhabited systems. Resource sharing agreements that would make territorial conflicts obsolete. Dr. Torres, this isn't optimization. This is galactic social engineering on a scale that makes the Keth Mori expansion look modest. Ambassador, the Keth Mori spent 50,000 years conquering the galaxy one world at a time. We're proposing to improve it one collaboration at a time. Dr. Torres gestured toward the docking Kethmori bio ship. Same ambition, better methods. Veltar was quiet for a long moment, studying the data streams and considering their implications. What's the response from the major civilizations? Enthusiastic, Dr. Torres replied. Everyone wants to participate. The resource efficiency gains alone make it attractive, and the technological advancement projections are compelling. And species that prefer traditional territorial independence, accommodated within the framework. The optimization protocols are designed to enhance existing governmental structures rather than replace them. Everyone maintains sovereignty. They just become more efficient at using it. Veltar realized she was witnessing the next phase of humanity's casual transformation of galactic civilization. They had started by solving the Kethmori problem through innovative biological warfare. Then, they had turned their former enemies into research partners. Now, they were proposing to optimize the entire galaxy's approach to civilization itself. Dr. Torres, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. What is humanity's ultimate goal? Where does this end? Dr. Torres was quiet for a moment, watching the construction activity outside the observation deck. When she spoke, her voice carried something that Veltar's translation matrix identified as genuine curiosity mixed with determination. Ambassador, humans spent most of our evolutionary history living in small groups, competing for limited resources, and believing that scarcity was the natural state of the universe. Then, we developed technology that let us reach the stars, and we discovered a galaxy full of resources that no one was using efficiently. She gestured toward the display, showing galactic optimization projections. Our goal is to see what the galaxy can accomplish when everyone is working together instead of working around each other. We want to find out what happens when 1,000 different species focus on building something instead of just maintaining what already exists. And after that, we tackle the next galaxy. Veltar's crystalline form went completely transparent, the equivalent of organic species going pale with shock. Dr. Torres, are you suggesting that humanity intends to optimize the entire universe? Not just humanity, Dr. Torres corrected. The galactic collaborative framework we're developing here. Once we've proven that cooperative civilization can work on this scale, there's no reason to limit it to one galaxy. The observation deck fell silent except for the steady hum of station machinery. Outside, the former terror of the galaxy was peacefully docking with a research station that represented everything the Kethmori had spent 50,000 years opposing. Cooperative civilization based on shared knowledge rather than conquest. Ambassador, Dr. Torres continued, 5 years ago, the galaxy lived in fear of ancient predators that seemed unstoppable. Today, those same predators are our research partners, working on projects that will benefit every spacefaring civilization. If we can accomplish that kind of transformation in 5 years, imagine what we can accomplish in 50, or 500, or 5,000. Dr. Torres smiled. Ambassador, the galaxy has spent millions of years believing that conflict and scarcity were natural laws. We're proving that they're just problems that no one had bothered to solve properly. Veltar studied the human researcher, trying to reconcile her casual demeanor with the cosmic scope of what she was proposing. Dr. Torres, your species has gone from primitive spaceflight to galactic social engineering in less than 3 centuries. Doesn't that seem rapid? Ambassador, rapid change is the only kind of change humans really understand. We're not good at gradual adaptation. We prefer to analyze problems, develop solutions, and implement them as quickly as possible, even when the problems are cosmic in scope. Especially then, the bigger the problem, the more interesting the solution. On the display, new data streams showed additional civilizations requesting participation in the Galactic Optimization Initiative. Species that had maintained isolation for millennia were asking to join cooperative research projects. Ancient rivals were proposing joint terraforming ventures. Even the energy beings of the Nexus core, who had avoided physical reality for millions of years, were expressing interest in collaborative development projects. How long until full implementation? Veltor asked. Phase 1 launches next year. Full optimization should be complete within 75 years, assuming standard cooperation levels. Faster if everyone gets as enthusiastic about it as the Kethmori have been about biological research. Veltar realized that she was witnessing the end of galactic civilization as it had existed for millions of years, not through conquest or catastrophe, but through systematic improvement implemented with the same casual efficiency the humans brought to every other challenge they encountered. Dr. Torres, in your professional opinion, what will the galaxy look like after optimization is complete? Dr. Torres activated a new display showing projected galactic development patterns 2 centuries in the future. The image showed star systems linked by efficient trade networks, worlds terraformed for optimal habitability, and collaborative research stations scattered throughout inhabited space. Every major civilization was represented, their unique capabilities integrated into a framework of cooperative development that maximized everyone's potential. It was beautiful, efficient, and absolutely unprecedented in galactic history.